Welcome back. In this video, we will be seeing what is for each loop. So you have already studied about for loop, right? Where it will iterate through every element using the index. In the previous video, you have learned what is array and how to access the array element using the index. And as I mentioned, the array index starts with 0, and whenever we are finding the size of an array or the length, it will always start from 0 and it will end to 4, right? If the total number of elements are 5. Now we have seen about for loop using arrays in the previous video. Here we will be seeing what exactly is for each loop. So in the program, I have declared an array named marks which will contain a marks of 5 students from 85 to 99. It may be and that is of whole number. Clear? I have declared an array named marks which will contain a whole numbers since I have declared using int data type. I have used for each loop. If you notice in the for loop in the above program, for in the for loop I need a variable I so that this I will be used to trace the index of the element. But here in the for each loop I am just using the variable called as a mark. Mark is a temporary variable which will store the result, right? Here I am not using the variable I as I have used in this program, as I have used in this for loop. This is the first difference between for and for each. In for each, I am not using any variable to trace the location. Instead, I will use only a temporary variable, and this temporary variable is used to store the result. Next, followed by a semicolon, which is mandatory. And next what I have, the array name. Array name is marks, right? That is why marks, because that is the array which needs to be traced and provided to the output, and that output is stored in the variable called as mark, right? If you see this particular loop, that is for loop, here we have declared the variable called as I so that it will trace every element, and also we have provided the condition where I less than or equal to 10. But here we are not providing any condition, right? Here, if you do not provide the condition, the loop does not execute at all. And followed by an increment operator so that the control goes to each and every element. Without this increment operator, the control doesn't go, right? It will be there in the same element itself. Here in the for each loop, I do not use all those things. I will use a temporary variable that is of integer data type so that it can store a result followed by the array which need to be traced, and I will print the variable called as a mark which will store the result. Now here if you see, less code is required compared to for loop. Here I don't put any condition, here I don't increment anything. I'll just declare a variable of data type followed by the array that needs to be traced, right? So let us see what output it provides. Yes, now in the terminal, if you notice, the first output what you got is for loop. So I less than or equal to 10 means it will iterate for 10 times. So all the numbers from 1 to 10 gets printed, since in the print statement I have provided as I. And next what we have is for each loop. In the for each loop also, if you see, I have provided the printing statement as a mark, where mark is storing the element whenever it's getting iterated. So how exactly it works? Let us see. Because it has printed all the elements clearly from 85 to 99, like whatever elements I have provided in the array, all the elements have been iterated and all they have printed, so none has been skipped. Now let us see how exactly for each works using the same example. Here I have taken the same example, and let us store the output here. Yes, here what happens, I have created a array named marks, right, where it will store all the marks of a student. Now int mark colon marks. So what will it happen? The iteration start through marks where all the result are stored in a variable called as a mark. right? So in this variable, all the results are stored. Now what happened? For each loop will not iterate using the index. It will iterate directly. So the first iteration begins here. Int mark colon of marks, the first iteration begins and 85 is taken out and put into the variable called as mark, right? So next it will print me the variable which is stored in mark, and the variable stored in mark is 85, right? Now similarly, it will move on to the next iteration where 90 is taken out. Where 90 is taken out from the array and it is stored in a mark. So the output, it will again print as 90. Next it is 75. Next it is 78, where after 85 it is 90, and after 90 the next variable accessed via for each loop is 78. So it will print 78 in the console, right? And next it is 97, where the iteration will be pointing here, and in the mark variable 97 would be stored. Clear? And it will print 97 in the output as well. Whenever the iteration begins, for example, marks will now be pointing towards 99. So whatever the previous value is there in the mark variable, everything would be flashed out, and the fresh value would be stored, and the latest value now in our array is 99. So it will print as 99. Clear? This is what we have seen in the console as well. From 85 the last element, everything has been printed. Whenever it is moving to the next element, for example, initially it was 85, next it will move on to 90. In such case, 85 would be flashed out and it will be pointing to 90, right? And 90 would get printed in the console. Next it is 78. So when it is assigning 78 to the variable mark, it will flash out 90 and 78 would be printed, since the latest value of mark is 78. In the console, like if you see, the latest value of mark is 78. The same happens with 97 and 99. Here we do not require a variable I, which is mainly used to address, here we do not require I, which will trace the location, and also we do not need to provide any of the condition. Why we are providing the condition? Because loop must stop at that condition, right? So here we are not providing any condition. Instead, we are just using this anatomy so that the loop will iterate through our entire array and it will stop at the last element, right? So this is about for each loop. If you see here, all the elements in the array have been printed correctly without even changing the index. Here the advantage is I haven't used any much complex code compared to the for loop. In for loop, like I have to declare the variable I, and then I have to provide a condition to stop the iteration, to run the iteration, and to stop the iteration. Along with it, even I have to increment the value of I, because it must trace every element in the array. So this is the difference between for loop and for each loop. Thank you.